33 is divisible by 3. I mean, here we are again.
All
on a
right,
3-even episode.
gentlemen, audience members, everybody, welcome to episode 33 of We Mortal Coils. I am your host for this evening, Trevor. That's Bray. That's Stefan. We got the whole list out.
Give it up for day 33.
That's right. That's it. We've gone through several name changes. We've gone through several new eras, and here we are. This particular evening, it is a Monday evening where we're at. This will get to you Thursday morning. But we are currently chilling with a topic question in mind.
Boy, if this doesn't sound like it was recorded on a Monday.
Yeah, I know, right? It's got the Monday night blues, the Monday scaries.
We are Monday in the PM.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're down and out, but we're gonna keep chewing through it because we love y'all and all that kind of stuff.
Smash that like button.
Yeah,
Do it.
leave comments, leave some hate mail. I love it.
Yeah, engage with the algorithm. Like shit upon us. You know what I mean?
It's like that guy coughed directly into my face guy right at the start of COVID. You'll see. Remember? Anyway. This particular topic, this episode, we are discussing a question. What could be a really bad question, but that's part of this episode. Are we in an age without heroes? Do we exist in a time period where there's so much information, where we know so much about so many things, that we are quite literally incapable of developing those sort of archetypal heroes anymore in our individual figures? That is to say, let me break this open a little bit, and then I'll open the table. You have figures such as, let's say, Jean-Paul Sartre. Let's say he's a philosopher, all this, all that, and his partner in crime, Simone Bolivar, and other people of that time period. You have their philosophy, their ideas, which influence a fair bit of the mind of today, or a fair section, a fair corner of people that find an interest in existentialism, find themselves reading Being and Nothingness and so on by Sartre or Softa or Sartre. It really depends on who you are, I guess. But up to you, however you pronounce it. But we know so much about these figures. We know so many really quite disgusting things about these figures. We know so much about everything now. And this goes back retroactively. We know so much about people in the modern day. Could it be said that we're incapable of developing heroes? Think of Winston Churchill, for example. There was a time period right during World War II and right directly afterward in the UK where he was looked at quite, well, not just favorably. He was seen as a hero of British morals and of British society. He is not looked at so today. There are quite many heinous documents that have been found and have been expounded in many different analyses and books that show some of his more venomous attributes. I mean, to really stretch this out and apply it to all people everywhere, as you live in this age, in this time, is there so much information? Are we incapable of having heroes? With that in mind, I'd like to open the table. Let's start with Stefan, maybe. We can start with you, and then we'd work our way over to the right for me, Bray. And feel free to give your spiel for the day or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so welcome again. I'm definitely under the weather, so if you detect a change, that's why. As well, for all of you naysayers out there, okay, I have something to say. We got a comment the other day about me looking down all the time. I'm writing, people. I'm writing. All right? Quit making fun of me. I'm sensitive. But no. It's so it reminds me of being back in AP English back in high school. And I had a particularly good teacher. She was very good at what she did. She was very near retirement. And, she held a dialogue with her students above anything else. She held a dialogue and tried to connect to us in such a way that we would understand. and we're talking about American heroes, and we were talking about Mark Twain, and about how like we put these people on a pedestal, and they just can't fit. It's like a puzzle piece. It's like we're trying to put a square through a circle hole type thing. No no person can long withstand a spotlight. Most recently we saw Joe Biden, for example. That's just what comes to mind. I mean, I wouldn't exactly call him a modern hero, and I don't think very many people would call him that. But you know, we somehow knew that he was dropping out of the race, seemingly before he did. I mean, and it's like this flow, this downpour, this Niagara Falls of information makes it very hard. Um, Another example that comes to mind is whenever we were first starting this podcast. Um, I had some very big thoughts about what if this ruins many of the illusions that I've set up in my classroom? What if they see who I really am, and the illusion starts to not work. All right. All your good teachers in your lives were illusionists. I promise.
Right.
They were magicians. And so like it's really the Wizard of Oz type of scenario. Like don't look behind this curtain, please. You know what I mean? And and I would never call myself a hero by any means, but you can get where I'm going with this. As soon as you know more about a person's personal life, it gets very hard to imagine them being being more than life as you once thought they were.
What's that quote where it's like, in order to be loved, we must submit to the mortifying idea of being known?
That's new to me, but I love it. And with that, Bray, feel free to open up the table to yourself.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. As always, are we in an age without heroes? It's a great question, and it's a very relevant question. That's a tough one. When I think about it, it's like you said whenever we were sort of doing our, basically, is this topic cool with you guys? Yeah, sounds good. Where you were like, this works backwards as well. Basically, what I mean by that is how we sort of, some people look back now. A prime example would be, I think people were going for Thomas Jefferson's neck a while back, or, it was when the statue discussion was going on, and they were like, let's pull down all this Confederate statues. And then the slippery slope made its way in there and suggested that we should also take down statues of like Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, because these people were like slave owners or whatever, whatever you can find on these people. And so I'm like, man, is anybody really safe from criticism? So yeah, I'm really excited to discuss that. What do I think? Do we live in an age without heroes? I think heroes are what you make of them, and everybody's going to have a different opinion about somebody, which is really where most of the conversation comes from today. Such and such person did this. It was spread all throughout the interwebs, and now the people, get to be some weird virtual arbiter of justice and decide whether or not we still like this person or not. And then that has a ripple effect, and you observe your friends or people that you know and how they react to the information, and that changes your perception of them. Not that this hasn't been going on, like you said at the beginning, or before, maybe it was right before we got started. Have we ever really lived in an age of heroes? People were doing this back in the before times. We just didn't have it on such a grand scale. But I do think that today's environment creates a lot of new variables and new situations due to the fact of the overwhelming connectivity of everyone. So I'm excited to see where we go with this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'd like to open up a little bit about what I mean by retroactive at the very start. So, when I say retroactive, I mean both. Let's start where I don't mean retroactive. I mean where we visualize and engage with people that exist right now, such as Biden. That was a great example. That's somebody that where we have so much information about them. There are so many skeletons revealed in the closet that it's really hard to encapsulate that person in one solid narrative or ongoing idea. That's basically, in a sense, what I mean by no heroes. It's no heroes in the sense of no solid good, but it's also if you allow yourself and break yourself open a little bit, you realize it kind of eliminates the ability to create coherent narrative. And that's really what this conversation comes down to. I know so many random factoids about like Biden, let's say, that it's really hard for me to create an
Narrative.
ongoing narrative for this particular instance. That is to say, that I could think of all of the evil things about Biden that he's done to this country, et cetera. I could think about all the good things he's done to this country. I could think of all the good things that he's done to his family. I could think of all the bad things he's done to his family. I could think of all the things he has done to the socioeconomic conditions of, I don't know, insert people in Idaho. There's so much information now, so much. What used to be a very easy ability to create this structured abstraction of someone else, an insulating barrier for someone's character. Instead, in the same sense that I am not evil, but I'm certainly not just good either. I am many different complicated things. And in that way, I don't have one coherent narrative for myself. I engage with many different narratives every single day. In the same sense, it's kind of growing now into the selfhood of other beings, not something I think came so easily before. I mean, specifically with all beings, even ones that you've never met, people who exist in terms of a story, such as Biden. I've never met Biden. I likely will not. Uh, and I think that layer of complexity, the fact that there is the ability for this level of complexity to be applied to virtually everyone. I mean, Julius Caesar, for example. Let's just so let me talk about retroactive, and then I'll cut there for a moment and just open up the table. So when I say retroactive, that's something else. What I mean by retroactive is that you and I, if you're so inclined, know way, way, way more about Julius Caesar than what many people have known about Julius Caesar through most of history. Even though someone from 1810 was closer to the fact, closer to the time of Julius Caesar, they didn't have access to more than several. They didn't have access to a book, or let alone a library, let alone an entire global networking chain of information. Due to the nature of our now information age, could it be said that this effect of no hero, no consistent narrative that we have today, is it being applied retroactively, where the way that we encounter most things throughout history is fundamentally different from the way that most people through history engaged with these ideas, with these people, with these heroes? Is through the death of narrative in that sense, death of ongoing, structured, powerful, profound narrative. And then from there, I'm curious. I'd like to be shot down immediately. I'm curious what either one of y'all think, if anyone has a direct idea.
Well,
What do you?
I mean, so like, I have it written down here. You and I know more about Julius Caesar today than his constituents, right?
Constituents?
I mean, the average constituent.
Oh, so
I
like the
mean,
average Roman.
yeah,
Maybe.
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 I mean, let's put it this way: you can't convince me that we don't know more than even just one of his constituents. You know what I mean?
Oh, fair. Yep.
You know, that would be enough to talk about what you're saying. I mean, so I've been very guilty of saying people don't have an excuse anymore. Um, you know, I apply that to myself as much as I can. Um, you know, people I've met who just can't seem to grasp some pretty basic stuff. You know, like for example, racist people have no room anymore. They just don't. Um, uh, they don't. We literally don't have room in our society for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but in places it's still common, and in time frames behind us it was common. So I mean, how do we square this circle, to use Trevor language on that one? How do we do this? This is the closest I will come to relativism. I mean, the closest. I feel like people before us kind of run the race. They kind of do their bid on this planet. You know what I mean? They run their race literally, and they just kind of work with what they have. And so today, what we have is the extraordinary ability for very common people to become these honored figures, right?
Yes.
So it's no longer the case that only the top echelon of people can become anything. We've raised the floor so high, and I don't think that our species is equipped, well equipped from our genes to understand what to do with that. Okay, like you know what I mean? I
We were
just I
just
really
talking
don't.
about.
You talking about that? Yeah, you talking
We
about
were
the girl?
literally just talking about
I
this
know.
before we got
I didn't want to
started.
bring it up. I let you bring it up. I don't want to talk about it.
All right,
You
Bray
know
has
what I
to
mean?
bring it up now.
It's disgusting.
Bray has to
All
bring
right.
it up now.
So Stefan could have put it on, like, provided a better segue. Honestly, we were just talking. I don't even remember how it got brought up. I think I just said it out of the blue
Yeah.
because
Yes, you did.
which is
It
honestly a sin on my part. But
tis a sin.
I had mentioned the Hawk Tua, meme
Yeah,
that's been
engage that
going
algorithm.
around, unfortunately. But we just sort of mentioned, how people can just it keeps getting simpler and simpler. It feels
Yep.
like that people put less and less effort into some sort of social interaction that gets spread by millions of people, and then suddenly, because of ourselves, I guess, they get launched into this 15 minutes of fame that they ride for as long as possible. Stefan, you had mentioned the Dr. Phil catch me outside girl, who is still enjoying the fruits of I don't, not that I'm checking in with her, but I am fairly certain she is still enjoying the fruits of going viral on Dr. Phil.
And
And that's
that's what I
probably,
mean, is that, like, that's
yeah.
precisely what I mean, is that that we've raised the floor so high that we no longer know how to allocate the proper resources to the proper places. I mean, it's bad. It's
I
really
think
bad.
if you want to talk about resources, it seems to me, if we're going to open up on this, it's more like we have so many resources. It's so slack, like the leash is so loose because we just have so many resources flowing around, whether that be seen in like capital, just cash, money, just flowing. It comes by so easily now compared to, I don't know, like 1810 or 810. At time periods where you're really constrained by what resources you do have, and people die of starvation every single day. Uh, Instead of that environment where it has to be quite taut, quite tight, and very strict, exactly who gets what and how. That's no longer what this period is. It's more about, we have constructed such a profound agricultural and manufacturing base that resources can flow seemingly rather freely sometimes. And this is one of those instances where all you have to do is say "catch me outside" or "huck it to you." I don't even know what that second one
Huck
is.
it to you.
Huck it
Huck
to
it
you.
to you.
Whatever it is. It seems like someone did
And
almost
also
nothing.
with you.
It seems like someone did almost nothing and then in return received almost everything.
Well, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah,
And this is
yeah.
not a new issue. I mean, Kim Kardashian exists.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well,
That's
you
it.
know, the thing that's interesting about that to me, Trevor, that you say that is precisely one of the arguments that's being made uh, toward the point of music has gotten worse, art has gotten worse as a whole due to the advent of the internet because we are so connected now. Previously, what you heard on the radio was only the best of the best
Was distilled.
because that was, these were people that were picked up and hired. Sure, there were still one hit wonders, but I'm fairly certain they were far more rare than they are today because these were, people were spending tons of money on these people expecting them to, stick around. We had a lot of huge greats that stuck around had long music careers. But now, because we have the internet and attention spans have gone to the shitter, it feels like every week there's a new, you know, artist X that releases something and then is just sort of either denigrates themselves to such a point that they remain relevant or disappear completely. And because we have access to such a large amount now, it seems like there's way more bad stuff than good stuff. When in actuality, all of that bad stuff was still there in the past. We just didn't have access to it.
That's fair. So one thought I have about all this comes right back to narrative. One of the reasons why people think, I've seen this argument before, that post-democratic, like liberal democracy art produced in our sort of civilization, is considerably worse than everything that came before, whether it be the Renaissance or even fascistic art. Like, I've seen that argument before online, and the basic argument goes that basically with every other period except for our own, you have a sort of consistent narrative that takes place that takes place and promulgates itself in art, whether that be in the Renaissance, where the upper class will want particular pieces of art created for a particular instance in a particular time to fit into a particular geist, such as during the Renaissance when people were getting in contact with artists to produce very particular works to fit as part of a clique. That's quite different. It's quite different from what we have now, where it's quite literally everything, everywhere, all the time, all at once, where it's just everything's being produced for every possible type of subcategory. It's basically like super inclusivity, where every single type of subgroup, whether that be the neocons, the liberal types, the Trekkies, the Goths, everything you could possibly imagine.
You could summon any clique and to mind, and you will find a community.
Exactly. And what I'm saying is, up until what you have now, what you would consider a clique was part of either there was one ordinate group from which all cliques are just stemmed from it, or more importantly, there is one overarching ordinate clique that everyone was subservient to, such as like Nazi Germany. I mean, everyone, you were subservient to the Fuhrer. That's just what you were. And so was the art. It was just like an overarching narrative of the fatherland, so on and so forth. The same thing with Soviet communism, where everything was following under an ordinate something or other. Now, one really interesting aspect of liberal democracy that I noticed is I'd walk around. I'm initially from Texas, and right now I'm in California. One really weird aspect of coming to California, coming to the Bay Area, is I'll walk around during July 4th and talk to people about what are they doing for July 4th. And I'm telling you, it was the strangest experience I think I've had in my time in California. A good 60 to 70% of people, more than half, said that they will not be celebrating July 4th. Period. They do not like the United States. They do not like this country. They do not like what it represents. And they first and foremost will not be celebrating July 4th. Now, that's really peculiar to me, because what it is what we exist in now, not just the United States, but you could just call it equally the West, is a place where you can celebrate any sort of idea that you want. There is no longer an ordinate grid that you have to apply yourself into. That's the whole point of liberal democracy, the ability to think however you want. But an after effect of that is all sorts of ideas in no ordinate category that everyone has to fit into. Every now and again, you get sort of the the neo, like, you know, like a World War II movie that talks about like the triumph of our forebears, or the Revolutionary War movie that Mel Gibson came out with, or whatever else. You get sort of an idea of what it means to be an American, you know, that people can kind of ally underneath, but you're not obligated to. There's no obligation to do so. So we kind of exist in a space where it's the full democratization of art, of ideas, and of everything. And I think that's really strange. And I think that makes us really, really, really different. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have no heroes. Because like it's in a country like ours, where one of the primary figures for our time was Winston Churchill. And just like that, nowadays, if you talk about Winston Churchill, you first have to mention, before you can talk about them, before you can talk about him, is what he did to India during World War II, during the period of starvation, during the famine that he brought to India. That's one of the first things you have to do, and that applies quite literally, unilaterally, to all people in this frame of reference in the colloquial West. Everyone has a caveat, and there will be no end to caveats. And I'm not saying it as if it's a bad thing, but it's a really curious observation, because that's not so. That's certainly not so in China. It's not so in Russia. It wasn't so in Germany, and it wasn't so previously also in Russia. Yeah.
One of the most crucial things that I think people today need to realize and come to understand, especially younger generations that are growing up entirely exposed to our technocratic way of life, that will only continue to get worse. And I do intend to use the word worse as time progresses. We have to come to an understanding that no one is perfect, despite however many heroes we've propped up in the past and turned a blind eye to their
foibles.
This is, like I said earlier, a very prevalent, very relevant topic of discussion today. Like, there's so many examples, and they all escape me because there are so many. But for example, one that I heard several times, which could be a good point to jump to. So you guys know one of my favorite shows to watch is That 70s Show.
I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's very much a comfort show for me. I used to watch it whenever I was a kid when it came on cable, and I've been trying to buy the DVDs.
By the way,
because
a relic.
Right? Yes.
I mean, what I mean to say there, listeners, that Bray just talked about how it's just going to get worse. This rapid progress of technology. We remember something my students don't, and we are only old enough to be their bigger brothers.
Right, and coincidentally, That 70s Show happens to be one of those shows that used to be on big media giant Netflix and is no longer there. Many people were like, well, how the hell do I watch it now?
You go on Paramount because it's owned by this company.
Right, it's owned by this, licensed out to this company now, and now you got to get a subscription there. Physical media, that's a separate rant. But Danny Masterson plays one of the main characters, and he, not so long ago, faced some, I believe, sexual abuse charges. I think he was found guilty. I'm fairly certain. And sentenced. Yeah. And so now, and this is by no means, like I said, not the only example. There are countless examples, whether they were found guilty of some charge or scandal, or the list goes on and on. In this particular case, we do have an example in which somebody was tried in court of law and found guilty. Now, some people will say that they will refuse to watch That 70s Show because Danny Masterson is a titular character and appears in practically every episode. And, perhaps to watch the show now is to support Danny Masterson in some way, or to, turn a blind eye to what this actor did, either before, after, during the filming of the, there's so many variables that go into this. But it's that age-old question of, can you separate an artist from their art? And if the artist, who we would consider a hero in this context, can we separate the hero from their heroic acts? Is perhaps the question that I'm asking. And is there a limit to where you can no longer
Well,
Is it something you do ad hoc, or
yeah. I mean, I like that. Do we just do this ad hoc? I
Yeah.
agree. No, for real. Like, I do not let my students play Kanye West in my classroom. They could play just about anybody else. Not him. All right. And I mean, I don't know. The more I consider this issue, the more we talk about it right here, the more I'm coming to the kind of idea that it depends on whether they're done or not. And what I mean by that is,
Are they
Danny,
done?
Danny,
He's done.
that show has been done,
Right.
right? They're not
Well,
making more of it. Okay.
I think the real question is whether or not they're still gaining money from it, and that could be one argument made for that '70s show and why you
That
may
could
want to watch it.
that's certainly a
I don't
facet.
think so.
But,
I mean, like, I don't think that Bray is giving 1/10 of one penny to Danny. What's his name? Every time he clicks on an episode,
It might
I
be
don't believe
something.
that
I
anymore.
mean, that's fair. It's probably not,
I
even
mean,
a cent.
surely they are still getting royalties
cent
in
of a cent.
some
Something.
format.
But
But I just mean to comment on sort of the feelings that I like. I like to watch reaction videos as well, and God forbid somebody watches a movie and the opening credits are coming, and all of a sudden it's produced by Harvey Weinstein, and suddenly
yeah.
that has a
Oh, yeah.
completely different
Yep.
connotation now. Every time you go to watch a movie produced by Harvey Weinstein, which, if you haven't figured it out, is a lot.
A whole bunch. I mean, like enumerated almost.
But are we just supposed to not consume this media anymore? Like, is it just tainted forever?
Well, I mean, so like, if you ask me, right? Of course, depending on severity, rapists shouldn't be around. Like, you know what I mean? Like people who've been tried and convicted of sexual assault need to go ahead and shove off this mortal coil, as we say. What I mean by that is, like, I was just talking with a student about this the other day. You can't profit off of an evil act. Okay, so Harvey Weinstein was a bully, a sexual terrorist, and everything else, right? And he made a whole boatload of money off of I mean, and that had to have something to do with it. I mean, he had to work his way, into it. And if these terms make you uncomfortable, they should. He's evil. I mean, and so, like, I don't know. It's so complicated.
I just think, to Trevor's topic's credit, it's probably a very crucial question: is can we separate a hero from their heroic acts in order to,
Well, once you separate, please.
I just mean to say, it's, if we can separate them from their acts, then is it true to say that we can still? I think we have to start from the basis that nobody is perfect. Like, that is just a fact of nature. Like, nobody is. There are no, except for maybe Dolly Parton. But
Ray, like, I would ask you this question. All right, have you owned slaves? I mean, like,
I have not.
Okay, have you caused permanent harm to anybody?
I could have, but not that I
I have
not in the same scale.
I have a question that might slice right through you, though. Have you ever consumed the flesh of another living being?
According to Catholics, I have.
No, I mean quite literal here. Have you ever eaten? Eaten another mammal?
Yeah.
Have I ever eaten protein? Yes.
Yes. Wouldn't you say that one aspect of the development and progression of our culture is an eventual evolution of our frame of reference towards one of essentially of vegetarianism and eventually veganism?
Yes.
Wouldn't that feel like a coherent evolution of our thinking patterns of what the West is?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Couldn't it be said that eventually there will come a time where our people that follow after us, our forebearers, or what would you call that? Those people in 400 years will look back and look at you and look at me and look at most, if not most of our viewers as disgusting. and in the same frame of reference that you and I might look at a slave owner. Couldn't that be said? And
Yep.
that's
I mean,
one of the
they
things
wouldn't
that my
they wouldn't
question's all
be
about.
totally wrong to do so, right? Um, all I mean to say there is that you have an empathetic response to your fellow creatures, and that doesn't stop me from consuming protein, right? I need it. I need it. Like, actually, I don't need slaves. No one ever needed slaves. You know
No.
what I mean? So yes, I guess we needed them to do this act or to do that act or to wage that war. I don't care. None of that was needed. We need to consume proteins. We are literally evolved to do so. Now, if you put me in a situation where that was no longer necessary, where it was truly, uh, you know, totally unnecessary, right? And this is my big point. And cheap to go vegan, to go vegetarian, whatever. I would do it. But
You
that,
know,
I mean, let me tell you something. As someone who is gluten free, any kind of special diet you have is not cheap, and it's not going to be in my lifetime. It's unfortunate.
especially in this area of the country. But to Trevor's point, or at least the frame he was trying to put around the conversation there, if we continue along the sort of slavery, vegetarian, or the very whimsical comparison that we have here, the same thing could be said by a slave owner in the days. And I'm not saying that you're saying it wouldn't, but they
Right.
could say,
Of
well,
course,
if you
they
take
would say that.
it, in fact was said, if you take away all of my slaves, suddenly this all becomes very expensive. How am I supposed to live without these slaves to do all my work,
Or
et
if
cetera,
you
make a living?
chattel slavery is a hard example to use in that instance because quite literally it was just for the sake of getting rich. I mean, in a lot of instances. So it wasn't to get out of crippling poverty, it was to make a lot of money. You could come up with some better examples. Like, for example, the Aztecs. They had like fished their lakes empty. They had really wiped out a lot of their food sources. And some of it did, in fact, come down to cannibalism. And you could look at it in a sense that slavery was, in fact, of equivalent utility to what people who eat meat today do. As strange as that sounds, you can create an equivalence there. And one other point I'd like to make, trying to make the absolute best devil's argument, or whatever you say, or vegan's argument from the other point of view. So the best vegan's argument I could make is it worth the life of even one living being for you to worry about whether or not your non-mammal flesh foods are cheap or not? The fact that it is much more expensive.
But that's exactly my point. We did not, so far as we know, evolve to have slaves. We did evolve to consume the proteins found in our cousin creatures.
The thing for me is that if somebody came to me tomorrow with a sheet of paper that said, if you sign this, we will do away with all the meat foods and everything will be derived from plants or grown in a lab, and there will be very minimal economic impact, et cetera, et cetera. If we had a plan to actually start taking which I think should happen, because little do people know that the meat market in the United States and globally produces more greenhouse gas than all the cars put together, which is insane. I would sign it immediately. I just don't have that power, and as far as I'm aware, there's not really anybody running for any position I don't even know how you would go about other than just pure activism.
What I speak of when I say how the future visualizes us, the past, I mean to speak as to you on an individual basis. I know that from my lens, I don't think my family is initially from the South, and there are people in my family that go back very far in the South. And I don't hold it against any one particular individual who was something 20 years old, that he wasn't able to put an end to slavery. in his time period before the
They're
Civil
all
War.
lonesome. Yeah, no.
Yeah, just that
Yeah.
one guy was incapable.
Mhm.
I don't hold it against him, but I would hold it against him if he owned slaves. I would do that. And in the same sense, Bray, when I bring up this topic, I don't speak to you in the terms of can you stop the mass industrial complex that happens to cattle in the United States. I wouldn't hold
Right.
you to that, but I would hold you to
Participating
instead
in
of
it.
participating in it as you currently do, instead start participating in things that are available. And this is where I try to cut against Stefan's point, where I say even though it's not cheap, and it isn't. Even though it's not cheap, and it's especially difficult to live that lifestyle outside of places like California that's catering to the vegans all the time. A place like Louisiana is a perfect example, a place where it would not be easy to be a vegan. Even though those things are true, are you still morally responsible to still do it? Is it like the scale is like that? No, like I don't. However much money you say you would save by going the other way, however much difficulty you would say would come into it, the scale is still fundamentally like this, and like those
Right.
are just small
So, I
ounces
mean,
in the very heavy bucket on the right hand here.
it's
It's
like
never equivalences. Yes.
one of my favorite things, like ever. I mean, until I die, almost certainly will be Star Trek.
Mm.
Okay. So, in this one episode, Picard is sitting here talking with this dude, and he says, "We no longer consume the flesh of," in my words, our cousin creatures.
Mm.
And he said that with all the stage presence of Patrick fucking Stewart. Okay, but like it was like he was saying it like that's the final word.
Mm.
We don't do that. Okay,
And it will not be done. Yeah,
right.
it's been fixed. It's
So
been finished.
what I
Yeah.
mean to say is like in that same way, we are to say we don't do slaves. It was just like a dad, saying it once and for all. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't do that here, And it wasn't said in an embarrassment or anything like that. It was just a firm stand, And that's what we have an obligation to do. Okay?
So
And I mean that. But Trevor, you speak of responsibility. We probably do have a responsibility to go vegan, but not an obligation. Does that make sense?
did we have an obligation to stop owning slaves?
Frankly, yes. Like I said, we, so far as I understand it, did not evolve to own other people. And in fact, I really don't like that term. I don't think anyone's ever owned anybody else. Someone's just repressed someone to the point of owning them. Or
Right.
you know what I'm saying.
Certainly.
We can look at our closest relative chimps and so on. They don't do that. That is some kind of heinous thing that I believe we invented. And until I saw other evidence, I would keep that opinion.
It's a weird thing to explore, slavery amongst other species. Well, you won't find it in chimpanzees. They do like to go on raids.
Mm-hmm.
They do that, and pretty heinous raids too. Like they run around with just in lines around their territory. It's actually really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There are some recorded cases. This has nothing to do with the topic at hand. There are some recorded cases of slaver ants, which are really interesting, where they capture the larvae
for sure.
of neighboring tribes and take them back and force them to do various forms of labor.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Anyway,
But
the reason
we
why
are not an ant.
are we more than ants?
And the chimps don't want me to work a 9 to 5 for the rest of my life.
Yeah, harvesting banana.
To answer your question, Trevor, we are neither more or less than the ant. It's just that we are not
harvesting
an ant.
100 banana a week for 2 bananas per day.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I brought up this topic, the reason why I tried to stretch it into veganism, is to essentially, to villainize you, to rewrite your own essential narrative, where there's this line drawn in the sand as to what's good and what's not right now, and to relativize it, which I know is a horrifying thing to do that we find often quite annoying. But I do think it's quite important to do when we talk about this whole no heroes thing. And to sort of redraw the reference point to show you that there are such things as reference points. It's no longer a point of what is right, what is wrong. It's more about like, well, what reference point are you referencing? Are you using to
what
make
date
this
does it come
position
with?
now? Yeah, what
You
date
know?
does this come with? I think about this really often when it comes to people like Van Gogh, where we think today very often about, oh my God, Van Gogh, he was completely forgotten in his time. Finally, we see him for what he is, this beautiful, magnificent artist. Now, I love Van Gogh, but what's really strange about Van Gogh is that there will be a time when people do not give a shit about Van Gogh necessarily. There's a lot of time between now and the end of the universe if such a thing ever happens. There'll be a time where he'll be completely forgotten. Same with Elvis, same with Coca-Cola. And he'll be completely forgotten. And before that point happens, there will be many different ebbs and flows. It's a bit like the Roman Empire. Ebbs and flows. There will be
The
rising and
decline and
falling.
fall of
Yeah, exactly. And rise again. Many different ebbs and flows of these characters. Well, nobody will give a shit about Van Gogh for a period, and then he'll pick up again. And the same thing's true for many things. And that has a way of relativizing everything. It depends on what reference you're looking at it from. Like one important point in history to take note of when you think about the 21st century, future listeners, way future listeners, if this is in a database somewhere, right?
Yeah, we better download these to a hard drive and put them in a thermonuclear bunker.
Yeah, some shit like that.
Some
just
Fallout
waste.
business.
Yeah, just cast aside the Odyssey. Cast aside like most like actual like useful human literature. There's just JPEGs of these three apes doing stupid shit for an hour and a half. But the reason why I bring all this up is to sort of relativize many different things and just sort of squash your coherent narrative, and to bring us back to the point that there can be no heroes. There can be no coherent structure from which everything is abstracted and is pulled around. You know, the way, if I exist in Nazi Germany, the way that I encounter everything takes into consideration the pull of what is fundamentally for the fatherland and for the Fuhrer. And the same thing's true in a highly totalitarian communist state, where a lot of things, the frame of reference is based on the ordinate grid. Everything comes back to this frame of reference right here, which is service for the worker or the proletariat, which eventually gets becomes synonymous with the party. Huge mistake, a huge mistake. But nevertheless, you have an ordinate grid from which things originate and go to. The same thing with fealty to royalty from different, if we're looking backwards. We have ordinate grids from which things derive themselves. And that doesn't really seem to be an attribute fundamentally to liberal democracy. I mean, to cut against that, you could say like, well, it's about like freedom and liberty and the expression of what you do want. And that's in itself sort of an ordinate grid. Except you don't. That's a complicated one. It's a complicated one. But do y'all see where I'm taking this discussion?
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah, I do have a question that may not be the way that you want to go. I wanted to ask, how would you evaluate if somebody was a good person?
Have they done no permanent harm?
That's definitely one way to look at it.
That's one of the biggest and only criteria that you could put to such a thing.
Are you being a good person? Is usually
like I'm trying to build up to, instead of just taking a quick route and going, let's name somebody that we might all consider a hero and then try to deconstruct them. Let's just start from the ground up and say, what do we think makes a good person? Because I feel like in order to be a hero, you may necessarily have to be a good person.
That begs the question: good person from whose point of view? That's what I'm saying.
Which is why I said earlier, I think all heroes are sort of doomed to be looked on by many different lenses. You know, it's all what somebody makes of them. I don't know if there are many objective heroes other than those that are state sponsored. Like Trevor was talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, the first eukaryotic organism was probably a hero.
Thank God
know?
for
Well, that motherfucker that decided to walk onto land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
That son of a-
Now I
maybe
have to
that's
work
how
a
far
9 to
back you have
5
to
for the
take
rest of my life and make 2 banana every day when I bring in 100 a week.
But I mean, you get what I'm saying? Like, I know it's absurd, and I was being facetious, but like,
Right.
that first eukaryotic organism really had a good idea, and
Mhm.
now it permeates the entirety of the biosphere. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So was that first eukaryotic organism a hero, or did it just do what was advantageous?
Well, it can be both of those things. The thing is, really, to get at the root of what Bray is saying, like what makes a good person. What I'm going to say next is really quite obvious, according to who you probably think I am. That goes to everyone, both of y'all and the listener. I think it's something that wells up from within. It comes in as essentially a notion or an intuition that you then sort of give a construct to, or you sort of construct an abstraction with to interact with. That is to say, it's something deeply individual. It's something that I am doing right now. I can only tell you that I relish those who give back, and relish those who love each other. I relish those who spend the time to do selfless acts. I deeply enjoy those qualities in a person, and when someone does those things, I consider them a friend. And it's from that I begin to build my local area, my friendships, my relationships, my local community, my state, and eventually my country. Those I work in that direction, and it's something that that comes from deep within. And I can't. Well, somebody might ask, well, what if all of this is relative? Of course, I ask myself this question: what if all of this is relative? What if I was raised in a place that values strength, or perhaps my own ethnicity over those other things? What if I'm a Serb in Yugoslavia during a particular time period? What if I'm that person? Well, I don't know. I don't. I can only be me. I can only be me.
Trevor the
And
Serb lives in my head rent free, though.
glad,
You
freely up
know,
in there. Yeah.
I just wanted to make this point before this episode was over because I'll regret it if I don't say it. But this might be the closest we've ever come to accidentally stumbling into the Skyrim Civil War discussion. It might be.
Travels free in Bray's head at all times.
Is Ulfric Stormcloak a hero?
I mean, if your answer is anything but yes, then I have problems.
Oh,
all right.
man.
Fair enough. Well,
Are
to go
you?
back to the,
Are you?
yes.
Are you? Oh crap! I was going to make a joke about. Are you a Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist?
right.
Are
Right.
you? Are you a? I'm a Nord. Well, are you a Elysian Nord? Or are you going to be a Telosian Nord?
What kind of Nord are you?
This episode got silly really fast.
Well, I mean, so look.
I think it just connects with so many different things that it's. Go ahead.
So I would just like to say, like, this question, right, is actually so fundamental to our being on this planet that it is permeated into our narratives as is. In other words, the question, can we have heroes, has permeated into our narratives. Bray just brought up that you could be wandering around Skyrim when you're 12 and it's Christmas, and you just got your first 360 or whatever, and you could hear a completely fake person say, I really think he did the right thing. And then, this other fake person say, I don't think so. You know what I mean? So, and then they fight and kill each other about it. Like,
Right.
what I'm trying to say is that this question has a culture of its own. And I actually reaped the rewards of that culture literally yesterday. I ended a 3-year campaign.
Oh.
A 3-year campaign with the same characters. We had we didn't take really any breaks, as we would call them. Like, there were no month gaps where we didn't play. All right.
We should probably mention you're talking about D&D right now.
Yeah, we're not talking about. I read The Art of War and I finished a 3-year campaign in the Himalayas.
Right.
No, I'm talking about D&D, right? And so for the listener, you need to understand something. I've been playing D&D, including those 3 years, for at least 12, right? So I mean, like, here very soon I will have been playing D&D longer than I have not been. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I will go across the halfway point, so to speak. I love the game, but we have not sat around and played this game for more than 12 years because the mechanics are that good. Okay, like they're not. All right, we get together to explore each other's stories. All right, most of us are writers, and so on. And so I'm a writer, and I give these characters to them, and they play with them for 3 years. And then I ask them, what do they think about them? I ask them, what are the best qualities we should incorporate? What are the best qualities we shouldn't? This, that, and the other. And the campaign that I closed yesterday literally talked about this question. It has to do with this heroic figure that will be looked on in so many different ways in the context of the world in which he inhabited. And there are many who will hate him, and there are many who will think that he is a god. You know what I mean? And so, it's really, this question, as soon as I saw it, I was like, we have to talk about this. I mean, I literally just got done pretty much writing a story for 3 years about it. That's my point.
Right.
And so, I don't know, like, it develops a culture on its own. And that tells me this. That it's never been, more different than it is now. As silly as that sounds, right? We have this free flowing information. It's just that these things just happen faster. You know what I mean? We've been struggling with this in our consciences, in our conscious mind for eons. I mean, no empire has stood forever, right? If we could believe in heroes without question, then maybe empires would stand forever.
Mm-hmm.
But even Jesus had skeletons in the closet. Okay,
Right.
I mean, we can look at what people say he said, and we can say that is not okay.
He was a
You know,
skeleton in a closet at one point.
yes, he was interred as a skeleton in the closet. But that's all I'm trying to say is that this literally has a culture on its own,
Mm-hmm.
and like it doesn't seem that big of a question, but it is that big.
Mm-hmm.
Solid point made. It's hard to know where to go with this conversation. It's Stefan, you're absolutely right that it does apply to everything, and it's hard to find any coherent way to sort of engage with it because it just comes down to
even middle ground is hard to attain.
Yeah, this is one of those things where you ever heard that phrase where like the person who gets onto the train isn't the same person who leaves the train. The person who sits by the window isn't the same person who spends their evening at their apartment after having arrived. Like your states of mind, like those states of consciousness, each kind of have their own distinct quality to them, where they're quite unique, almost decisively different beings, distinct different beings. It's really quite strange, and in the same way that I'm like grasping at the straws of my own mind, trying to figure out what I am as a coherent, cohesive self, or what my consciousness is fundamentally. I'm kind of doing that with this whole idea of narrative and this whole idea of all of these things, all of these long-reaching stories, and my own fear of, well, one day the Roman Empire will fall, and I'm terrified of that. This fear. and keeps me holding on to this narrative is as soon as it falls out from underneath me and something new comes, and it just happens again and again and again. It's like it's that tension of wanting to hold on to the stream as it rushes out of your hands, and that's applied to life, but it's also applied to my very being within life. It's like a fundamental problem of being in time. It's kind of reminds me, there was a children's color book or a children's book that my mother read to me when I was very small. I must have been like 3 or 4 years old. I still remember it. It was a Sesame Street book. It was a terrifying book. It said as its title, there was a monster at the end of this book. That's what it's called. And each page, it was only like a sentence long, and it was I think it was Grover, the blue guy with the big nose. And like at the very beginning, it was like, Grover, like, did you see the title? There's a monster at the end of this book. Don't flip another page. You flip the page. Like, dude, why'd you flip a page? There's a monster at the end of this book. And he keeps flipping, and he's getting more and more terrified and anxious of the monster that's hiding at the end of this book. And like your mother would keep flipping through the pages, and you'd be like, stop it, there's a monster at the end of this book. And like you would that same tension of just anxiety for just anxiety's sake, sometimes to me is fundamentally what consciousness is at times, where when you try to actually grab a hold of the self, especially when you're very early in meditation, when you first begin meditating, when you first get into it, when you're trying to grasp a hold of and understand what you are, at times that becomes what you are. Your need to find yourself. It's a bit like what we discussed earlier, where you're constantly turning a corner trying to find yourself, and all you see is your own shadow.
Trevor. I love how Willy Wonka said it in the Gene Wilder version. He had that little buttercup thing, and he goes, "Oh, the tension. I hope it lasts." Like, you know what I mean? Like, trying to find yourself. That's the point.
Yeah, it's what's strange about it is you never do, and it's this tension there, and it's just always the tension, and it's constantly trying to grab a hold of something, trying to understand what it is, but fundamentally you don't understand what it is, and furthermore it falls out of your hands before you could even begin. And what is it? I quite literally mean my own self, and in a sense any of my abstractions, any of my ideas. And it also becomes any of my loved ones or any of my narratives, such as like America. One day this country will collapse in on itself. I mean, that's just a matter of course, a matter of fact. Either that or something really peculiar will happen to a point where it's not recognizable to someone like me.
Right.
It's really quite strange. It's one of those things where we organically want to create boxes and chambers from which things can appear to be safe, but the only thing that we're able to actually create that stays safe are abstractions, just ideas. The things that actually undergird what those abstractions of our minds, the physicality that's out there changes so much that our abstractions fail, and then we feel as if they've died, when as a matter of fact it's just that all that went was our own expectations based upon those abstractions. It's all just a matter of our own expectations.
So let me ask this then on that about, sort of this perpetual change, and everything that we are pulling out of these are just abstractions. This should meld really well with that. It's a two-parter. The first part is a practical question. The second part is a fun pop culture reference that we'll all enjoy. So the first part, this is the question. Do you guys think that we should stop glorifying people so much and instead start glorifying what they do, like their actions, their heroic acts, instead of them? Because while
Bray, like you and I are on that exact same wavelength. Like, this happens sometimes. You know what I mean? I literally have my closing thoughts written right here, talking about the not being the same person, right? That Trevor brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I literally have it written here. Like, we have to take the good parts out of the people in our lives and keep them, and we genuinely have to discard the rest. I mean, like, if you can't do that, then you're in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one in your life is totally bad for you. And so if we can do that, we have to do that with history too.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly like you just said. We have to stop deifying people and start recognizing their most human moments.
Mm-hmm. Right. I just think to your point, Trevor, people are always changing, but in a singular context, an action will remain what it was in history forever that way, so long as there are people to know of it. So this comes the fun part. So would you consider Darth Vader a hero at the pinnacle of Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, when he steps in to save Luke's life, despite all of the horrific galaxy-wide
Atrocities.
that he committed
Literally an evil cultist.
the years prior? Would you even go to the point of saying him a hero, or just say that he was a villain who performed a heroic act and that's it?
Well, that comes down to a fundamental question to you, Bray. Will you ever be forgiven?
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that, because that's my whole point. That is one of the main pillars of this conversation is will humans ever learn forgiveness, and where do we draw the line at something like that?
I think Vader was true to the Sith way all the way to the end.
I think
right.
I don't think he did a heroic act. I think he did a selfish one.
He fulfilled both prophecies at the same time.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? But like he literally, he looked at the stability that came with the Empire and said, "Fuck it, we ball," and then he saved Luke's life out of a selfish desire.
I think y'all's argument at each other right now is the fundamental point of this entire episode. But go on.
Well, yeah, I'm saying is in that same token, he freed the entire galaxy from the
pure
corruption and in order.
He just happened to find himself in that situation, and he was like, I can't not toss him down the reactor core.
I just. In keeping in universe, I just think about the common person in the Star Wars galaxy post the Battle of Endor.
Right.
And there would be definitely those that go, oh my gosh, Anakin Skywalker returned and was this grand hero that helped destroy, the Empire. Now, of course, in universe, there would be very few people that would know that. They would only know of the guy who went to whatever. Anyway, that's besides the point. What I mean to say is, I feel like the vast majority of people would be like, oh, I don't give a shit. This guy was a terrible human being
for literally
who slaughtered
forever.
Thousands of people, if not millions. Necessarily millions. I mean, they blew up fucking Alderaan and, other things.
Hey, Grand Moff Tarkin did that. Know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
Well, I think we have to approach this from it's a weird word, but from the phenomenology of it, from the phenomenological perspective. So in psychology, there is a subsect of psychology from people such as Edmund Husserl and, in a sense, also Heidegger, who's like a famous continental philosopher. So phenomenology is essentially, it's a weird word to say, is essentially the study and understanding of the world through the lens of a perceiver. What is it that a conscious person does, and how do they engage with the world? And from that perspective, how can we encounter and understand what certain concepts are and what they mean? And by that, why did I bring this up? I mean to say that when you and I think of, this is the easiest one on the planet, easiest bar none, is Hitler, let's say. When you and I engage with the concept of Hitler, it's from the lens of the perceiver, the one that engages with ideas. Hitler is a catch-all term, a simplified concept from which I can encounter a fascist dictator, an evil person, an evil ruler. And that's really what he is. He's a representation of that idea in my mind. And whenever I think of evil things, I engage with that idea. And essentially, the reason why I bring this up is, if you want to talk about Darth Vader now, and like how it's strange that all of us really will look at him as evil when in that moment he was a hero. But the thing is, he is a simplification for most people from their own lens. He is my version in this example of Hitler. He is, when I engage with Hitler, I don't think of him in any other lens in the real simplified context, in basic discussion as well as basic discourse within my own mind. He is nothing more than a basic, simple abstraction from which I can bounce off ideas. And I would have to really study the sentimental, heroic moment at that exact key frame before I can begin to appreciate him in this other context. Such as, I'm not going to come up with an example for Hitler, but for Darth Vader doing this heroic thing, I guess. Like that would be something else, a very specific instance, a very specific discussion that we would have to have before I begin to look at him in that reference. And this comes down to what humanity fundamentally does with ideas. It's Adolf Hitler, Genghis Khan, Chinggis Khan, or however you want to say it, or many other figures in this world and in history, are encountered in a particular way in simple terms, and then you can dive into their character and understand them under complex terms. But you have to understand that in most instances, it's we engage with things in simple terms. We engage with their basic core idea. It's a bit like me telling you to trust the vaccine experts whenever it comes to taking vaccines. But if I were a vaccine expert, I might disagree with that other vaccine expert about a particular thing, a particular article. Like if I were an actual vaccine expert, I would tell you, well, actually, this thing, that, and the other thing. I could give you information when I know a lot. But for most people, they have a very different lens, a very simplified lens when they engage with the very simplest of the beginnings of an idea or abstraction. What Hitler is just a very simplified thing that most people engage with. And that comes to what you mentioned now about Darth Vader in this instance.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, what you said is to the point of, we create these sort of abstractions of people throughout time. But, necessarily, it's kind of like what we were talking about the Julius Caesar thing. It's like we have our own understanding of what these people are now. Which again, I think is what drives me back to that idea of we should instead glorify actions instead of people, because the people can necessarily always change. Not to plug one of the most quoted quotes ever, but it's like it said in The Dark Knight: you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I mean, if you die doing something heroic, it's almost like that's your defining moment. And nobody can say anything after the fact. Of course, there's still things to be said about the past, but who's really thinking about that when you've gone with such,
gusto?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would bring this back to you, Bray. It's not my initial phrase when I said, will you ever be forgiven? A better way to say it, and to kind of complete this whole point about Darth Vader, is it's not will you ever be forgiven? It's will you ever forgive yourself? And that is ultimately what this all comes down to. Back to the your own frame of reference, your own visualization. I can't control what other people think. I can't begin to do something like that. But I can try to complete my own story. And part of that involves just that, doing something heroic even though you're too far gone. You're obviously too far gone. It's quite blatantly clear, Bray, that you are too far gone. It is too late. You're irredeemable. Completely. And I can't believe you even try.
Damn.
That perspective, that in frame of reference, like that thing I just did just now, take that in juxtaposition with your own story, and engage with it as you may. And I'm telling you, at the end of the day, you specifically yourself should understand that you will be forgiven. You can forgive yourself through Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I think forgiving yourself comes from understanding that you have nothing to apologize for.
This is yes.
Well, go ahead, Trevor.
Well, I was going to say this is a fun place to end the episode, I suppose. It kind of became fuzzy. But
I was going to say, I'm glad that you mentioned Christ, because what I was going to say was that for closing, everyone, no hero can exist in a vacuum. no one is heroic by virtue of existing. That's why we created God, so that somebody could be a hero by virtue of simply existing, written into their character, so that there is no way that this figure could possibly do anything wrong.
So there
And
is
there
a
will-
holy one.
Yeah, there is an eternal
Mm.
hero to look up to and admire, and nothing could go astray. However, when we come to the conclusion that many of us have, that these are falsehoods and there is only us by which to judge everything, this is where we run into questions like this. And we try to prop people who look, walk, and talk just like ourselves up on a pedestal and claim that they are a hero or they are heroic, when in actuality we should be glorifying their achievements or their actions. Because, like I said, no one is walking out onto the street and saying, I want to be like so and so because of their virtue of existing. Nobody just wants to be that person because they are a hero. They want to perform actions that that person does as a hero. That is what they want to emulate. If you said that you wanted to be like Frodo Baggins, it's not because, now some people may want to be a hobbit and live in the Shire and eat a lot of meals all day, and that's a separate issue. If you want to be like Frodo Baggins because he is a hero, and it's because you want to go on a long quest and do some, crazy life-altering shit to save the world.
Whereas
and
Tolkien
many
was
other-
trying to tell you, you should want to be like Sam, not Frodo. You should want to go back home and realize that, you got plenty of stuff to do at home. You know what I mean?
Right, and little tiny people living in the earth eating a lot of food is not nearly as memorable as little tiny people living in the earth eating food, going on a very long adventure and doing incredibly heroic things and saving the world. That is why there's an entire story about that, and not about little people living in the ground for 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my piece on that. Great topic.
This was a real
I've already said
everywhere
my
episode, but I
closing
love it.
thoughts. I completely agree with Bray. We need to start vilifying moments when people show their most human qualities. It's like what
we
Frank
need to start.
Herbert.
We need to start glorifying, not vilifying them.
Yes, excuse me,
That's what I was about
glorifying,
to say.
glorifying
That's what you said.
moments, yeah, and vilifying people.
Yeah.
There we go. Glorifying moments and vilifying people.
There we go.
It's just like what Frank Herbert's trying to tell you in Dune. Put your hand in the box, and we will find out if you're human. You know what I mean? I love that to death and pieces. It's like, we're only human, a few times in our life. Other than that, we're apes, and that's that.
All right, that's a fun place to end. I have been Trevor. I will continue to be Trevor for a while. This has been
Until
We Mortal
inevitably
Coils.
create a new abstraction of you that does not align whatsoever with this current version.
No, I was more thinking in the reference of one day,
The
1,000
train.
years from now, some guy will look back and like, I will continue to be Trevor. Like, oh, no contraire. Anyway,
Well,
very true. I hope you enjoyed this episode of We Mortal Coils, episode number 33. I will see you next week. Hopefully, we will have our special guest Michael up here for the next episode.
yeah,
If not, the one after that, I am
Reviewing
sure.
that big document.
Big ass document he sent
Ooh.
us. We're gonna all read an essay.
Big ass It's 15 pages. Believe
Right.
It's big ass.
how
document.
far we've fallen since the collegiate days.
Since the philosophy. All right. Well, with that, y'all have a wonderful.
Y'all be good.
Throw out your lunch tongue.